In 2020, we made a commitment as an organisation to respond constructively to the Black Lives Matter movement, aiming to become more diverse, more inclusive, and support more Black owned businesses. 100 Stories is a new video and podcast series that's intended to provide a platform for people of colour to share their experiences of prejudice and journeys to success. For our first story, Laurence Grant interviews me on my experiences growing up and my response to the current climate following the Black Lives Matter movement.
I think at first, I know you a little bit, not a lot, but I was even having a chat with Saffron yesterday about 100 Stories stuff, and she was asking me, are you just going to dive straight into the issue, or, especially with Eva and Monica and Sean, because we work together, you don't need to go into their backstory. But actually, I think the kind of opposite. I think I would personally love to know, from day one, what was the Eva experience?
Yeah.
Because you've done so much, done so many amazing things from the days or the year or so that I've known you, in terms of, kind of young inspiration and all the awards that you've won, and being kind of selected out of quite a large group of grads to join the Sussex Innovation team and things like that, and just how competently you've managed to the George Floyd group. I mean, I've been super impressed, but I don't know Eva from the very roots. So if it's not too invasive, I'd love to know the story from kind of where it all started.
Okay.
Yeah, take us through, whistle stop.
So kind of like a bit about background and maybe how I got here, maybe, do you think?
Yeah, I'd like to know, where you were born, where you grew up, what was the family like, what was it like growing up? So what was Eva like from the ages of 0 all the way through to...
Cool, okay. So I grew up in Havant, which is just outside Portsmouth. And that's it's kind of a small town. It's a small town itself, but it's a big council. All the towns are connected, and you're 15 minutes outside Chichester, 15 minutes outside Portsmouth. So there's lots going on.
Yeah.
And it's by the sea and the country. But I was born in Kingston, not Kingston Town, Jamaica, which someone has accidentally asked me before, which is fine. Because my dad worked for IBM for 30 years up in London. But him and my mum are both from Portsmouth, so they lived in London, then they moved back home when they'd already had my older sister and me. And I think as a child I was very happy. I was a very chilled child who just liked to eat, sleep and paint and just do whatever. My sister was a nightmare apparently, but I was the laid back one. At school I was always it's weird, I think, because at junior school I was so confident. I was orchestra leader and all that sort of stuff, and I was such a nerd and I loved it. Then you get to secondary school and all of this pressure to be popular and that sort of stuff just kicks in, and I definitely went in my shell a bit. And then college it kind of came back out again. But in relation to what we're talking about, so my mum's mixed race as well. So her mum is from Belize, which is in Central America.
Okay.
And she moved to England in the 60s because my grandpa, I don't know the story that well, but he went over. She was in a beauty pageant, and then my grandpa fell in love with her, and then she came over to England. And so she moved over in the 60s to I think it was Bath, which is very white. And mum said whenever she'd be walking on the street, if she saw another black person, they'd always stop and chat. They'd always say hi, because it was so rare that you'd see someone. So it's going to be oh, hey, how are you? Where are you from? What are you doing?
Hey,
oh, this is weird. It's kind of uncanny. And yeah, that's kind of cool. And I think my grandpa's family were quite accepting. My grandma passed just before I was born, and kind of clearing out the attic, she did find some old letters that were from my grandpa's family. Cool. Just telling grandma to go home, we don't want you to be in our family. And I don't know I don't know what happened, but obviously she stayed, had 2 kids, and like my mum's never said that the family were never mean to her or anything. They're accepted her. They were like, you know, she's the niece, she's the grandchild, and it sort of went from there. But yeah, I think it was definitely difficult. And my mum, she doesn't really talk about her experiences because she was obviously like black going to school in the 80s. She had like her hair was massive, like it's like mine but tighter curls, but it's outrageously big.
Cool.
She doesn't really talk about many things. And when I wrote the article I wrote, she read it and she was really like proud about it and stuff. It's really cute. And she was saying how when she used to live across, you know, like in the cul-de-sac, she'd go across the road to another family's house because it was her friend who lived there, and it was the older brothers. They'd always open the door and they'd be like, "Oh, Ellie, it's your friend." And she was like, I won't say the word. She can't even say whatever word it is. And obviously it's something
Really?
derogatory, but she was just like, I don't like to think about it. She doesn't like to think about it. And I wrote actually another article when I was at uni, which was about like relationships and interracial relationships. And my mum read that one and she was just like, oh, I had a lot of, oh, you know, you're not my type so much. I don't like black girls. But yeah, she doesn't talk about it, which I find interesting. And I think in a sense, when I grew up, kind of like, I know like lots of my friends who grew up in London and other places like Bradford, I think because maybe their parents are first generation, they're more in tune with, you know, their culture. Like my friend who was Nigerian, they still cook all Nigerian food, but my mum doesn't. Okay. And I kind of think that maybe because when my grandma came over, I kind of think there was this pressure to be white and fit in, especially because they weren't in a city. You know how like when you hear about when lots of Eastern Asian people came, and there's kind of communities in the cities and kind of diasporas of cultures in other places. I think because she didn't have that, it didn't so much pass down. So my grandma spoke Spanish, my mum doesn't speak Spanish, I don't speak Spanish. There's some food that she'd cook that was Belizean. And I remember once I was like, Mum, did grandma ever cook fried chicken? And she was like, yeah, all the time. And I was like, why don't you cook me fried chicken? And she was like, she didn't give me the recipes. It's just, you know, so funny stuff like that. But back in relation to school, I didn't really think about the fact that I was like black or of a different skin color or culture from my friends. And my sister was once like, you know, like a couple of years ago, she asked me, she was like, when did you realize like you and mum were black? And I was like, I actually like don't know. I was just like, it's so weird because my sister's actually white. Right. She's blonde hair, blue eyes. She's my full sister. Okay. But yeah, that's how the gene pool chose my sister, which is quite fun, which makes it interesting. But yeah, I never really engaged with it. I think I kind of could tell looked a bit different than all the other people, and everyone's like, you know, a bit Irish or something. And I was still always really proud of it. Like I was always like, I kind of like enjoyed having something that was a bit different. And my friends did. They were quite, you know, accepting and stuff. So there's like some things I think back to now. Like my friend said in school, she was like, I want to marry a black man so my kids look like you and stuff. And I was like, that's nice. Okay. Just like stuff like that. But then I think it's when you get to secondary school and people become more, I don't know, I don't even know what the word is, but I think people can become either more cynical or more rude, or, you know what I mean? Like kids are very innocent. They kind of like,
yeah, it's almost like, I think you touched on it earlier in terms of when you get to a certain age, everyone starts to become a bit more aware of themselves and where they fit socially, and it can become super catty, you know, I guess people start to pick out the differences quite aggressively in high school, right? But how did that play out then?
So again, very white school. There was more, Portsmouth has quite a big Bangladesh and like Pakistani community. So there are like quite a few people from that background in my year. But there was maybe like 3, 4, I think. They definitely used them in the pictures, Skyline from Trinidad and Tobago. But in my class, it was me and Tanya Varghese, she was from Bahrain. And that was it. And people just make black jokes all the time, like just like in front of you. And I remember like once even I said a black joke because it was, you know, some like boy I fancied, and I said it and everyone was like, huh, and I was like, yeah, you know, like I don't mind, it's fine. And you just reflect on that and you're like, that's terrible, but that's kind of like you absorb everything that's around you.
Yeah. And
this is kind of, I guess, like year 7 to 9, I guess. And people just make jokes, really. Be like, oh, are you eating chicken again? Oh, you black people love watermelon. Or I got like the other side, which was like, oh, you listen to rock music. You're not really that black, which is a whole other like issue, the being not black enough, especially when you're mixed race. Also, the fact that being black has to conform to certain stereotypes is outrageous. You know, like black people have like R&B and hip hop. That's not a thing. And the fact that people like, you know, I don't like to say to white people, oh, you have to love, I don't know, what's his name?
Classical.
Yeah, like classical. It's just ridiculous and stuff like that. And I remember, so on like, we learned a bit about civil rights, and I was just always really interested in it. Like I went to uni and studied that with English, and I missed the lesson about this, you know, on the KKK. And I came back and the teacher asked a question and I knew the answer because I'd actually watched a documentary. And he was like, see, even, he was just talking to the class, like, you guys are being lazy. And someone was like, yeah, but she's only interested in it because she's black. And I was just like, you're kind of right, but like, I hate what you said. You know, like, I am interested in it because it's black, because it relates to my history. But also, like, why aren't you interested in it?
Yeah. How do you feel about the whole thing? Like from George Floyd, obviously Black Lives Matter predates George Floyd.
Yeah.
Like such a tragic event and the amount of PR around that. And, you know, have you seen a change in any opinions that you were surprised by? Or do you feel like things are actually solidifying and people are being a bit more divided? I mean, it's such an interesting tapestry of change at the moment.
Yeah. So I think obviously, like, when the video came out, it's a horrible video, but I didn't think it would incite such a movement because I've seen those videos before. They've been around, you know, I don't know how many years. Like sometimes you just go on your phone and you know you have those algorithms, so they know what you're looking at. And I've seen videos like that when it's like, oh, this watch this black person get, you know, experience police brutality, and they're horrible to watch. And sometimes I don't like watching them because it depends if I'm feeling in a good place I can, but if I'm not, I'm like, I don't want to watch this. But I don't understand why this one incited a riot. I don't understand why this one incited, not a riot, but you know what I mean, incited such a reaction. Like there was the girl, I can't remember her name, unfortunately, but the girl who killed her aggressor, someone was like sex trafficking her, and she got like 70 years in prison. And then people were comparing that to, you know, all those rich white actresses who bribed to get their kid into like Yale and Harvard, and everyone was talking about, you know, how much they get in prison compared to white people. Then you had 13 come out, which is about, you know, the incarceration system. And it's all the information has been there for ages. And it was like Will Smith is like, I think it was Will Smith, was basically saying how this isn't new and this isn't suddenly progressing. It's that suddenly people are just recognizing it. And I think
recorded, right?
Yeah. And I think like, yeah, exactly. It's someone had a phone at the right time. I think at first I kind of felt a bit cynical, to be honest, about seeing everyone posting like stuff, and I'm like, that's nice. And then suddenly it was like, I could, on my phone, it was everywhere. It's like, here's what to do, here's how to be a good white ally. It was like, mixed race people, here's how you can do better. And I'm just like, oh, I kind of felt like I was like drowning in social media, and I had to like not go on it. And me and my friend Holly were talking about this, and she's black. And I was like, I don't want to sound like one of those people who's like, I heard this song before it became a number one. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that is a bit like, I found it frustrating. But then I was chatting to someone, and they were like, yeah, it might be frustrating, but still, isn't this a good thing? Isn't it like better late than never? You can't be aggravated towards it. You know, you have to, if you care about, they kind of like were quite blunt. They're like, I mean, like, get over it. This is how it's happened. And I was like, yeah, you're right.
Interestingly, it's quite a good analogy you've come up with, particularly like you focus on a band and like they've just released the first album and no one really listens, and then suddenly it's like, whoosh,
you want to be like, hey,
I was here the whole time. Can I have more credit? I want at least a t-shirt and a signed photo. Hey, I was here first. But even, especially in innovation, like there's something called the bell curve, which is about the innovators and then early adopters and then like people that jump on a trend, and that's where it really starts to go up. And then those that kind of do it because they feel they have to do it because the majority are doing it. And then there's the ones that resistors and things like that. It's almost like there's a huge adoption rate of like the Black Square and hashtag Black Lives Matter, and a lot of corporates or even just individuals like posting about it, and probably 70% of those people is all that they did and probably all they have done. I guess from your perspective, what do you feel good has come out of it, and what do you feel people need to be aware of?
I think definitely what is good that's come out of it is that people realize it's not just an American problem, that there's issues in Britain, and I think also it's that I think people are starting to understand like how just because racism isn't Jim Crow, how big race isn't like someone like beating you up because you're black, doesn't mean it's not there. Kind of, I guess, systemized racism exists, and people kind of open their eyes to how the system is pitted against people of color and BAME people. I don't think people really got that. I think people were very much in the opinion of like, well, if you're good enough, then you'll succeed. It's all about self-preservation, and if you've got it, you've got it.
Meritocracy stuff.
Yeah. But also, I had one of my friends who used to make like loads of jokes. He actually messaged me and he apologized.
Okay.
It was really nice. He messaged me like, oh, hey, everything that's going on, I've just really been like reflecting on me and how I've acted. And he was just like, I'm really sorry for everything I said to you when we were in college.
I mean, that's pretty amazing.
I know. I was so shocked. I was like, honestly, like, I wasn't holding anything against you. I understand, like, he's from a much smaller town. He's from a much more right-wing town than I am. So I kind of saw it as his, where he is. And he was like, no, I know you weren't holding a grudge or anything, but I just wanted to say it. And I was like, that is just really, really impressive.
That's such an interesting point you make, because and hats off for the level of empathy, because I think there's a lot of people who maybe wouldn't have the same level of self-confidence or self-awareness or self-assuredness, where someone who has actually made them feel pretty uncomfortable and upset for a long period of time or frequently could say sorry, and they'd have the humility to be like, you know what, like, appreciate that, thanks, never held it against you. And then the point you make about that kid being from a even smaller town, and it just makes you think a lot of people are doing what they think they should be doing a lot of the time because of their environment, or their surroundings, or what they're told, or what they digest, particularly, as you say, with the bubbles and the algorithms bouncing around you. Almost naturally, like, you want to ask, are things getting better? But it's hard to know, right? It's
Yeah.
hard to know. I mean,
I can't remember the last time someone said anything, especially like at work. Like, I worked in a few, like, lots of hospitality, and I used to get like a few comments and stuff like that.
right.
But I haven't had that. Like,
Yeah.
I can't remember last time, which is really good.
But to tell me a bit about that then, like the difference in working attitudes, and I know you mentioned, you know, talking about jokes and banter, and we've spoken about what one person thinks funny is actually like super annoying. But
Yeah.
do you ever come across things that you genuinely feel like people are just not aware? They even think they're saying something good, or, you know,
Like someone who's trying to like help.
yeah, because I know like positive discrimination is an interesting topic we've spoken about a lot, even within Sussex Innovation and things like that. I mean, what's your opinion on that? Or, you know, I guess the simplest way to ask the question is, when it comes to responsibility, like your personal responsibility as someone who's like mixed race compared to someone who's white, you know, what do you feel the actual balances of responsibility when it comes to addressing these things and making real change? And
Yeah. So I think like if white people do want to help and make a difference, I think then people have to talk to people of colour. I don't think they can work it out on their own.
Yeah.
I think there has to be like strong communication, because there is a sense that people will never fully understand the experience. Like, I'll never fully understand the experience of like a trans woman and what it's like for them.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, like, if I wanted to do something to help, you know, their plight, I'd have to talk to them. I think it's just communication. And also, I think people need to be patient and like kind of let them finish, if you know what I mean. Quite often, like when you say something, I guess, like, did say, for example, the day Trump won, I was in America, and I was really upset, and I was just like, white people are racist. Very sweeping statement. I was just, you know, I was just upset, and my professor had just said it before, and you know what I mean? I was just like, I was just enraged. And then my friends started like attacking me. Like, when you say that, like, you're saying like we're horrible, and I'm like, no, I'm not saying that. I kind of like took it back. But basically the point I'm getting at is that if white people are talking to black people about their experiences, the white people shouldn't take it personally and be like, well, I didn't do that. Well, I didn't do that. It's like, this person isn't talking about you right
like
now.
denying it.
Yeah, they're talking about their experiences in their society, and as in a society. And I think people are often quite quick to like be like, but I'm not racist. And it's like, no one's saying you are, but it's
yeah,
like,
I mean, tell me about like that whole like all lives matter thing is just a joke. Like,
I know.
why people feel the need to say anything like in response in such a defensive way, you know? Because I think almost the point that's being made is, I love this quote, which is that you never learn anything that comes out of your own mouth. So like, listening is actually a much more powerful tool than speaking, justifying, comparing, like denying, like defending.
Okay.
You know, so I mean, there's just a lot of listening to be done, right?
Yeah, that's a lot of listening, I think.
100 Stories was inspired by the hundreds of brave people of colour who have felt the Black Lives Matter movement has given them an opportunity to share their stories and experiences. This series coincides with the increasing demand and interest from allies who want to better understand the forms of prejudice and microaggressions that take place every day. We want our 100 Stories to be an accessible platform for Black people in and around our community to share their stories, either anonymously or openly. We do this in a bid to keep the conversation alive and continue to help people understand what it's like when you don't have a seat at the table. If you're interested in sharing one of your stories, please get in touch via media@sync.co.uk. Thanks for listening.